There was a man.
He went to San Francisco by himself when he was young. He was imprisoned 3 times, had 4 wives in different periods, became a hero 5 times, and won court cases 6 times. He had 8 sons, more than 40 grandsons and granddaughters. The man settled down in North America and lived up to 100 years old before he passed away peacefully, surrounded by his extended family and offsprings. Please welcome the 8 young Chinese Americans who will tell this heroic tale.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to TangMen. My name is Bradley Fang, and I am 13 years old. I currently live in Connecticut. I'm very excited to read today's story about TangMen. I hope you enjoy. Genmao won the lawsuit, paid back all the debts and favors, sent half of the money home, and left a small amount for the renovation of TangMen, a Tang-style restaurant, as his inspiration and goal. He's determined to build an American TangMen with his own hands. Attorney Williams was forced to leave Kingsford. Allen was thrilled to be able to rely on the combined power of the Labor Association and the Labor Party to stop the East Coast from passing the Chinese naturalization proposal, temporarily winning the public opinion and making white laborers feel more secure. Allen felt very accomplished, and his next step was to drive the Chinese out completely, at least from Kingsland first. The presence of the Chinese made him restless. He decided to push harder, just in the name of the Labor Party, using speeches as a weapon in the streets, in the media, in various places where people gather in Gold Mountain. He struck anywhere and everywhere, and he would not stop until he achieved his goal. No one had asked him to do this, but he just felt he had this mission, and he was getting more and more addicted to the speeches. He has given up on a specific job at the brewery, and he survived on the dues paid by his fellow workers, a kind of civic politician as opposed to a professional one. A sandy area near the City Hall in Kings Mountain, California, is a frequent meeting place for people, with thousands of people gathering on more than one occasion. Allen saw this ideal platform for a speech. One day, he jumped in the podium and gave a speech on 3 points of view. First, recognize the ugly faces of politicians and stop reusing them. Second, capitalists and rich people must release all employed Chinese workers. And finally, the Chinese must be kicked out. Allen says, folks, we should retaliate against those politicians who break their promises. When they pull our votes, they do everything to please us. And once they succeed in the election, they turn around and betray us. And some politicians even go around touting that the Chinese can do it. I suggest, for those, they deserve to be killed. Yes, there was an exaggerated clamor from the stage. Allen continued his speech. I also want to warn the rich businessmen that they are not allowed to hire Chinese workers. And if they do not disband the hired Chinese within 3 months, let them wait for a bullet. Ha, we only set a fire to scare Williams away. The people on stage roared with laughter. Allen was scheduled to speak for only 1 hour, but the more he talked, the more excited he became, the louder and harder he became, and it took him 2 hours to reach his climax. And suddenly, he bluntly took off his jacket and unbuttoned his collar, and he asked, everyone, who am I? Why must I be so vocal here? I just want to help you all not to go hungry, because I've tasted hunger, because I come from a hungry country. I never want to be poor again. My thoughts are straightforward. Listen, if I, before this country, encounters hunger again, then what will I do? He made a decisive and violent move by wiping his neck. The crowd was sticking their necks out a little, stunned. Don't be afraid, he said. Yes, just slit their throats and take everything they have. If I can't live, they can't live either. And who are they? It's the silent Chinese around you. They don't speak our language. They don't go to church for worship. They work 10 hours a day without sleep. They gamble. Their women sell their bodies. They smoke opium. They eat rats. They're totally different from us in color, culture, customs, appearance. Folks, can you tolerate living in the same land with such a community? No, absolutely not. The laborers listening to the speech broke out in applause, and it was as if they had suddenly found the cause of their poverty, which was the Chinese. Allen said with intense emotion, As long as the Chinese are here, we will all starve. What should we do? In my opinion, we have to let the Chinese go back. Yes, tell the Chinese to go back. Since the Chinese are stealing our livelihood, let's cut them off. The audience was completely ignited. Go! Get rid of them! The irrational underclass rushed to Chinatown, picked up wooden sticks, and vandalized Chinese laundries, grocery stores, and restaurants, while others chased them by their pigtails. Allen led some of the demonstrators straight to TangMen. Li Genmao blocked the door and asked Allen, "You came here more than 10 years before the Chinese. We also signed a labor contract and were hired by the labor company. We all came here to earn a living. There's no hatred between us. No reason. You deserve to be smashed." Li Genmao did not fight back. He dismissed the guys. A wise man does not suffer the immediate loss. Li Genmao couldn't bear to see TangMen burn down, and he left Chinatown in a daze without looking back. The police arrested Allen for incitement to violence. In fact, Allen had been taken away by the police several times. However, each time he was released quickly, since no one testified against him. Attorney Williams in East Coast read about the vandalism in Chinatown and publicly mocked Allen in the media. The shamelessness of an organization of almost entirely foreigners who had been treated generously in the United States, but had banded together to defy the law and deport another class of people who had the same legal rights as they did, should outrage every honest person. When Genmao arrived at the pier, a large number of Chinese were standing in long lines in horror to buy return ferry tickets, some for days. Was this the way to go back home? Although Genmao was upset, he had no choice but to sink his teeth into the situation and wait for his ticket home. Someone pushed his way through the crowd and tapped Genmao's shoulder from behind. It was Zhou Banxiang. He was panting, holding a telegram in his hand, and handed it to Genmao. "Finally, I found you. It's great," Zhou Banxiang said. "This is from Engineer Oliver, who was anxious for you to select 50 Chinese railroad workers to build the railroad from New Jersey to New York on the East Coast. This is a section with steep climbs and sharp turns, which are very difficult to build. What does it matter to me if he stops his project? The engineer couldn't get through to TangMen, so he asked me to come to you and ask you to go there for sure." When they heard that there was a job, many Chinese workers who were waiting in line for a ticket gathered around, full of uncertainty in their faces. Genmao asked, "What is the salary?" "A 3-year contract, $9 a month, food and board, pork, beans, and rice included at every meal. The conditions are still good. I'm an interpreter, I can get more. Your salary must be higher than mine." The Chinese workers who gathered around Genmao said, "If you go, we'll go too. We'll listen to you." Zhou Banxiang said, "The East Coast treats Chinese better, so let's all go. Also, I asked many people about your father's whereabouts. Some said they had seen him on the East Coast. Some said the gold mine boss had a medical emergency and he left with him. The East Coast is so big, where does the boss live? I heard your father doesn't like to pile up with the Chinese, and he had worked in several gold mines, all of which were owned by foreigners. As you can see, Sierra Nevada is full of mines. North America, South Americans, Asians, Europeans, 200,000 to 300,000 people come and go, and it's hard to find someone." Genmao decided to go, not only to find Dad, he was thinking about Juzi, and he didn't know where she was and how she was doing. And the second and third brothers were on the East Coast, so what's the point in going home empty-handed? 2 years ago, several thousand Irish and German workers were building a railroad line from northern New Jersey to New York, and because of the treacherous terrain, the progress of the project progressed very slowly, and the workers often went on strike, making the project manager resign. He read in the Pacific Railroad report that Engineer Oliver praised the Chinese workers, so he came to visit Oliver in rural Connecticut. Soon after Maria returned to East Coast, her immune system, already weakened, contracted typhoid fever, and she died shortly after. Oliver graduated from mechanical engineering school at the age of 14, followed his father around the world at sea, and was a captain for 12 years until he fell in love with Maria at first sight at a party, and he said goodbye to his wanderings on the ocean and married Maria. After the marriage, Oliver went to Jinshan to build the railroad, and Maria later moved to live there. After burying Maria, the grief-stricken Oliver decided to go back to sea again and continue to be his own captain. Ken, the head of the project, asked Oliver to introduce a group of Chinese workers who had experience in road construction to help him out. Oliver agreed, and also agreed to go to the pickup station. but he refused to be an engineer. In the name of Anti-Labor Association, Allen published the news of Chinese workers coming to the East Coast through the media platform in advance. Isn't this the way to steal our jobs? The whites, panicked and angry, decided to hold a march to stop the Chinese workers from getting off. As agreed beforehand, Genmao and the Chinese workers took a steam train to the East Coast. In fact, the engineer boarded the train in Tennessee ahead of time, and he cautioned everyone not to be afraid, as he had already figured out a way to deal with the situation. Before the train arrived at the station, hundreds of protesting whites had gathered nearby. They put up banners and shouted slogans, telling the Chinese workers to return where they came from. The train entered the station, and as the crowd approached the cars, a smash-up was about to take place. Inside the carriage, the Chinese workers, who were prepared, waited quietly to get off, with Genmao standing firmly behind Oliver. Oliver was seen with his hat down and his sunglasses on, a handgun in one hand and 4 more in his waist. The car door slammed open and the crowd of demonstrators opened the door with clamor. Oliver jumped out of the car and shouted, "Get out of the way! Get out of the way!" But one of the protesters didn't listen and shouted, "Chinese people don't get out of the car! Go back to the West Coast!" Oliver fired a shot into the air, and the man was immediately brought under police control. At the same time, 20 prearranged security guards with guns appeared at the entrance of the car, and they pushed through the crowd of protesters and escorted the Chinese workers to get off the bus quietly. Li Genmao walked in the front, and behind him, the Chinese workers were uniformly dressed, 1 baggage each, wooden-soled shoes, fat leg trousers, blue cloth tops, and wide-brimmed hats. Genmao had never seen Oliver so imposing. After settling down the Chinese workers, Oliver took Genmao to his home and had him cook a Taishan meal. After eating and drinking, Oliver gave Genmao a key and told him to come over and do house cleaning every once in a while. Also, to take care of Brandon if he ever returns home. Brandon hadn't been home for a month, and after Maria's death, their father-son relationship had reached a low point. Oliver said that he and Maria had no children, and Brandon was Maria's brother's only son. Brandon's parents both died of typhoid fever. He was only 5 years old when he was adopted into Oliver's family. He grew up lonely, rebellious, and no one could get into his heart. Genmao asked Brandon where Brandon was now. Oliver said he should be hanging out on the Broadway section of New York. He's 18 years old and doesn't need me as a supervisor anymore. We went to the park in Manhattan area, which was originally a large farm. Many people traded livestock there. Because there were a lot of people, some people in the music industry put up a metropolitan recital hall there. But it didn't run well either, and now it's become a casino and a skating rink. Genmao said, "Don't worry, I'll ask my second brother, Genlong, who lives on the Broadway with Williams, the lawyer, to help him find." And soon after Genmao and Chinese workers arrived in New York, Genlong and Genwang came to see their brother at the site, both worried about the Chinese workers, fearing that they would be driven back to the West Coast by the protesters. Genmao watched Oliver sail from the dock, and Genmao said, "Goodbye, engineer." Oliver corrected, "You should say, 'Goodbye, my captain.'" Oliver, having lost Maria, decided to go venture north, perhaps back into the arms of the ocean to find inner peace. He believed that the sea is the closest place to God. The workers on the East Coast worked 8 hours a day and had Sundays off. The Chinese workers did not have the habit of going to church for worship, so they spent their day doing laundry, washing their hair, cooking better food, or going to Chinatown, not necessarily to buy anything, but it was a place where they could hear their native voices. Genmao was offered the position of supervisor's assistant, which was easier for him compared to most Chinese workers. On his second day off, he couldn't wait to get to Chinatown to inquire about Abba and Juzi. There were only about 200 Chinese residents in East Coast Chinatown, and there were hardly any women on the streets, and it felt a bit deserted compared to Jinsan. It is chilly on an early autumn day. As Genmao stepped into Chinatown and was picking up some goods in front of a dry goods store, he came across 2 gangs in a firefight. In the distance, a man wearing a bowler hat crouched in the street, holding 2 pistols, shooting at several people coming after him in a few dozen meters away, some with short axes, some with rifles, some with short guns. Two of the pursuers fell to the ground in response, and the man in black, with the scar on his face, gave the order to Annoyance. Brothers, fire! He's out of dog food. Washed his body. This is the coded language of Axe Gang. To wash the body means to kill someone. Dog food is bullets. The man crouching and shooting was shot in the arm. He covered the wound, got up, and ran. The man behind him continued to chase him. The wounded man ran toward Genma and suddenly put his bowler hat on Genma's head and said, Brother, block me for a while. I'll repay you for your kindness. Genma was shocked to see that the wounded man was Akui. Akui rushed into the dry goods store. After Akui came to East Coast with Juzi, he only wanted to run a small business in Chinatown incognito. But Juzi couldn't always hide in the house. Although the alley was deep, a unique fragrance of wine could not be hidden long. The Axe Gang's leader, Mr. Wang, took a liking to Juzi. He first tried to impress Akui by pulling him to join the Axe Gang, but Akui refused. He also let Akui manage his casino. And he also told him about the channels of opium trafficking. Akui accepted all these benefits, but he would later not let Juzi show her face. Master Wang was not really anxious, so he negotiated with Akui as long as Juzi was offered the casino. Under the Axe Gang would be his, and Master Wang would only operate the opium house. In his opinion, Juzi was just a prostitute, and he made such a big offer to Akui, which was a once-in-a-lifetime deal. But Akui felt insulted and declared war on Master Wang to defend Juzi's reputation. Master Wang was unimpressed by Akui's challenge because he knew that Akui was no match for him when he fought alone in Chinatown. He ordered Akui to deliver Juzi to his apartment within 48 hours or he would wash his body. But Akui burned down an apartment owned by Mr. Wang, killing and injuring 2 gang members preemptively, and thus triggered the chase by the Axe Gang all the way. When those from the Axe Gang chased to the door of the dry goods store and found that it was not Akui who was standing at the booth, they asked Genmao if he saw an injured man. Genmao pointed in the opposite direction. They then chased after him. Genmao entered the dry goods store, and the owner, frightened into a ball, said the man had just robbed him of his melon cap, wrapped his coat, and jumped out the back window and left. Genmao followed the blood trail to look for Akui's whereabouts, and found him in a house, and saw Juzi helping Akui, who was covered in blood, into the door. Genmao hid himself to the side excitedly and was trying to figure out how to get in when he saw Juzi come out and say frankly, Akui recognized you and said you would follow him. He told me to tell you to leave right away, or the Axe Gang would come looking for you, and everyone would be finished. Also, Akui told me to ask for his hat back. Genmao hurriedly slammed his bowler hat to Juzi and asked, Is this how you live when you follow him? Juzi calmly said, The day you got off the train, the Axe Gang and Akui also brought people over, saying they were secretly protecting you. But Akui also said he would never be kind to you whenever he saw you. I said, if you kill Genmao, I would kill myself. He said, this is indeed proof that you do not love me, so more convinced that I would kill Genmao. It was the bastard who stole you in the first place. I wanted to take back the person who belonged to me. I'm not worth putting your life in danger. I'm really pregnant, and he doesn't know it yet. The fish have dried up and died, so you can be your big bird. Genmao grabbed Juzi's hand. Come with me. We made a vow. Even if there is that day, we will stay together. Juzi broke away. We can't go back to the past. Let's forget about each other. Juzi! Akui in the house painfully said. A hat to take so long? Juzi decisively turned around without looking back and piled on the words. Go home and live well with Afeng. I bless you. Soon, Akui, who had changed his makeup and was assisted by Juzi, carried his suitcase out the door and threw down a message to Genmao. Remember, I owe you a life-saving favor. Genmao was stunned for a moment and immediately went after him, saying, You can't even walk. Where can you go? How about this? I'll find a place for you to hide. Well, everyone, that's it for today. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed.